finance on the ClassPad app. So let's have a look at this, because this is something that people tend to find a little bit tricky. But once you make friends with it, it's super easy. And particularly when you get to the Year 12 course, there's sometimes no other way that you can answer these questions. The reason for that is that if you look at your compound interest or your simple interest formula, and I might just write those down somewhere. Let's see if we can find a space. Okay, so if we looked at the compound interest formula, all it tells you is the balance of the account. You type in your principal, then you go 1 plus whatever your interest rate is as a decimal, so you divide that by 100, divided by n, which is how often you compound per year, and you raise that to the power of n, your compounding periods, just tidy that up, times t, which is your number of years. And again, we usually put that in a bracket. So that's your compound interest formula. But what you'll notice in that formula is that what we have the balance at the end of the period, which is your principal plus the interest you've earned. You have your principal in there, your interest rate, your compounding period, and your number of years. But nowhere in that formula is there any provision for you to actually be paying off for a debt if you've got a debt, or to be adding to your savings if you're trying to save. And of course, in the real world, you're never going to get a loan and just pay it off as a lump sum at the end. You're always going to be making payments progressively. So the only way you can calculate those things is to either do it on a spreadsheet, which is fairly simple if your compounding period matches up with your payment period. But if it doesn't, then this finance app allows you to deal with those things nice and easily. So let's have a look at this. So in your ClassPad, if you tapped on your little menu icon at the very bottom of your screen, I don't think I've shown the bottom of any of my screens far enough, but on the little black bit around the border, tap on menu if you haven't got the menu. Then what you'll see is down the bottom here, you need to tap on the right hand side if you can't see finance, and then you'll get this little finance button. So you're going to tap on your finance button, and that's going to bring you up with a screen like this. Now if it doesn't bring you up with a screen like this, then you're going to tap onto that Calc 1 and then hit onto the compound, and that compound option, compound interest it will say, and that will bring up the screen that I've got in front of me here. Now the trick is to work out what each of these little buttons mean. What you'll notice is at the bottom of the screen there's a help button. So if you placed your cursor inside any of these cells and then tap on that help button, it will come up with a little explanation of what each of the things are, but sometimes people still get a bit confused, so I'm going to run through those with you. So I'll just take off my little lines there. N is the number of times that you have basically how do I word that? It's the number of instalment periods is what the help button will tell you, but it's basically the number of times that you've made a payment. So what's really critical in this is that this N is always linked to this PY. PY is how many payments per year that you are making. So I'll write that in. So that one's payments per year. So if I was paying weekly, I would type a 52 into that PY button. If I was paying monthly, I'd type a 12 into that PY because it's how many payments per year. N is how many payments over the life of the loan. So whatever you've placed into PY at the bottom is what you should place into the N button, and then you'll times that by the number of years that you're going to do it for, and that would tell you how many payments you've made over the life of the loan. Sometimes you're actually not going to type anything into N though. Sometimes it's N you're trying to solve for. So often the question will ask, how long will it take you to pay off a loan? So in that case, you're going to fill in all the rest of the buttons and then tap on N to solve. But you've got to remember still in that case to interpret that N back in relation again to this PY. So again, if my payments were in weeks, then that N is going to tell me the number of weeks. But if my payments were in months, then that N is going to be a number of months. So you need to make sure you interpret what that number in N means, and you're always going to look back at that PY button to determine that. I is nice and logical, that's just your interest rate. In every other maths thing that you do, you generally have to divide that interest rate by 100 and put it into a decimal form. In this app, you don't. You just put it in exactly as you see it. So if my interest rate was 4.2%, I would just type in a 4.2. PV is your present value. So this is basically what we would call P in all the other formulas. So it's your principal or your starting amount. So it might be, if it was a debt, it's the amount that you've borrowed. if it was a savings scenario, it might be the deposit that you initially put in before you added any extra savings. Now, the quirk on this one is that you should put it in as a negative. It's kind of still going to work if you don't put it in as a negative, but what gets confusing, let's say you were saving, if you put that in as a positive amount here, and then you add your savings, PMT is your payment. So if I then added my savings into PMT and then clicked on my FV, which is my future value, to get my balance, it'll tell you that you've got a negative balance. And people don't like seeing that. They kind of look at that and then go, well, how come if I've been saving, I'm now in debt? So if you always put this PV value in as a negative, then you won't have that problem. So it goes in as a negative regardless of whether it's a debt or whether it's your money in savings. Just remember that. Then we're going to look at the payment. Now, payment is what you're adding. So if this was a debt to begin with, then the payment is what you're paying off. And what I want you to think about is how you're going to put in the sign on this entry. So if this was a debt to begin with and I'm paying it off, I'm going to put the payment in as a positive value because I'm doing the opposite things, so I want opposite signs. I've started with debt, but then I'm paying it back. So I'm doing the opposite. So I'm going to put payment positive for a payment on a loan. But if this was a savings question and I'd started with a deposit and then I'm adding more savings, then I'm going to put my payment in as a negative value because I've started with savings and then I'm doing the same thing and saving some more. So the signs need to be the same is the way I try and get people to think about it. So negative the savings per period. Okay. Then we've got FV. Now, FV is your future value. So that's the balance that you're going to have at the end. So that's going to be either, and I'll just type that in. So that's my future value. That's either going to be the amount that you've got in your savings account at the end after you've put in your initial deposit. If you didn't have one, it's just a zero. You've put in all your extra savings. And plus, of course, your interest will have been added to that. If it's a loan, then your future value is how much you still owe at any given point. So the question might ask you, how much do I owe after a year or 2 years or whatever? You could put in N, you'd work out how many payments you've made up to that point so far, click on your future value and it would tell you how much you still owe on the debt. Or more often than not, they're saying, well, how long will it take to pay off a loan, or how much will I need to pay per period to pay it off? And in that case, then that future value would be a zero. So you might want to, in your notes, I think I've already put it in the notes that I gave you on that investigation, but future value is a, zero. Sorry, I want that as a pen, not a highlighter. Your future value would be a zero if paying off a loan. So that's one that people often get stuck on and they say, well, I don't know what the balance is. If you've paid it off, you don't owe anything anymore. So the balance at the end would be a zero, and often you have to do that. Now that leaves us with one more square, which is the CY. So CY is basically your N on your old formulas, and it's how many times I'm compounding per year. So write that in there, so compounding per year. So if I said that I had a set interest rate compounding monthly, then my CY would be 12. If I said I was compounding fortnightly, then my CY would be 26 and so on. And CY and PY, the payments per year and the compounding don't need to match up. So if you had like a credit card, then generally you're compounding daily, but you're probably only paying that off every week or every 2 weeks as you get paid. So that's what each of those are. So let's have a look and have a go at playing with those. So my first example that I've given you here, let's say we had a car loan for $20,000 and we were paying that should be a decimal there. So we're paying 6.8% compounded daily. And my first part of this question, I've said, well, if I pay $200 per month, how long will it take me to pay off that loan? So we need to fill in the screens. Now, because my first video failed, this is already filled in, so I'll just talk you through what we've done there. So first of all, the interest rate was 6.8%. So we put that one into there. So that was what we would normally call our R. And again, I haven't divided that by 100. I just put it in. My loan was $20,000. So I've put that in with the negative there, negative $20,000. And then because it's a loan and I'm paying it off, I'd want the opposite sign. So I put it in as a negative initially, but my payment will go in as a positive because I'm doing the opposite thing. I've got a debt, but I'm paying it back. So I was paying off $200 and I was paying that off per month. So my payments per year is a 12. My compounding in that scenario that I was giving you, I said that we were going to be compounding daily. So that's 365 times per year, and that's what goes into CY. And then you'll see my future value is 0. Because it's a loan and I'm paying it off, I'll owe nothing at the end. So I'd put my 0 into there, and then I'd literally just tap on this N. Now, when you do that, you'll see that your class pad would give you 148.22. Now, we have to interpret that in relation to that PY. Because my payments were in months, that 148 is months. So it's 148 and a bit months. So at exactly 148 months, I won't quite have paid it off. And so I'm going to go into 149 months altogether. Now, if I just take the 148 and divide it by 12, that would turn it into years for me. Often we want to know these things in years. So it's basically just over 12 months, because I'm in months, so 12.3 months, so roughly a year. Now, invariably the question will then ask you about how much interest have you paid or earned. In this case, I've said, well, how much would the loan have cost, which is basically the same thing. So basically, how much have I paid by the time I pay interest as well. So that doesn't appear on your screen. It's not a button there, but you just need to use your logic. If I'm paying $200 every month and I've done that for 148.2 months, then the 200 times the 148 would tell me how much I've paid altogether. So altogether I've paid $29,640. I only borrowed $20,000, so obviously the difference there is my interest. So if I take that $29,640, subtract what I borrowed, the difference there is the interest that I've paid. Now this question actually asked how much would the loan have cost. That answer is just the $29,640. That's what the loan has cost me. But the interest that I've paid is the $9,640. We're going to get slightly more complicated that when we do the Year 12 course. And in that case, if I had the 148 here, then I'd need to bump that up because at 148 months, I haven't actually paid it off. So I'd need to make one more payment. However, if I paid the full 200, we know that's going to be too much because I only had to go on for another 0.2 of a month, not the whole month. But what we do in that case, and I think I may have done it in the next screen, but I'll pop it in here anyway. So if you're doing the ATAR course, I won't be that stringent on my Year 10s, but in the ATAR Year 12 course, we're going to bump this up to a 149 because we know we're going to have to make that extra payment. And then we would have tapped on this future value. And what that would give me, it will give me a negative number. It's going to tell me that I've now gone too far. And basically I would get this 200, my normal payment, take away what I've overpaid, and that would tell me what my last payment was going to be. So for any Year 12s watching this video, don't forget you need to do that step. For our Year 10s, I'm happy for you to do it just as I have there. Now, if I want to pay the car off in 5 years, how much do I need to pay off? And then I've said, well, I might say how much would it be per week, or if I want to pay fortnightly, how much would I pay per fortnight or per month? So let's have a look at this. And this won't be as simple as if I found my monthly amount. I can't just divide it by 2 for a fortnight or divide it by 4 for a week. Don't forget there's not exactly 4 weeks in a month either. But even if I had weekly, I couldn't just times it by 2 to get my fortnight because the compounding of interest will actually change those amounts just slightly. So they'd be close, but they wouldn't be correct. So we actually need to calculate each of those things. So let's see what we're going to fill in here. So if I wanted to pay it off weekly over 5 years, then I've got my 52 weeks per year. So firstly, I would have typed in my 52 for how many payments per year. And then I would have reused that number at the top. So 52 times a year times my 5 years. And you actually don't need to calculate that number first. You can type it into your class pad just like that. I put my interest rate in, my 6.8. My present value is a negative, my negative 20,000. My future value will be 0 because it will be paid off. And I was still compounding daily, so 365 times a year. Once I've done all of that, I would have just tapped on my payment button. And we would see there that it comes up with an answer of 90.797 So basically, it's roughly $91 per week. Again, because this is in weeks, we need to interpret all this as a weekly thing. And of course, going into your A and B grades, you need to show that you can round appropriately. And in the context of a finance question, that would be to 2 decimal places because we've got dollars and cents. So in this case, rounding this to 2 decimal places, if I'm going to stop at my second decimal, I need to check my third number. And if that number's a 5 or more, then I need to round up. So in this case, because it's a 9, I'm going to round up. It's going to have a flow-on effect. So I'd wind up with $90.80 per week. The second part of my question was, well, what if we were doing it fortnightly? Then I'm just going to change these entries. So now I'm paying it 26 times per year. So in PY, I'm putting my 26. I would then put the 26 times 5 in my N for how many payments overall. Tap on my payment button and you'll find you'll get an answer of $185.71 per fortnight. Likewise, if I wanted to turn that into a month, I only just need to change the payments per year to 12. Don't forget to fix that at the top as well. Tap on your payment button and you get your payments. Okay, so keep an eye on the time. Yep. Okay, so let's do another example. Let's say we're going to save this time. So let's say you're going to go for your gap year and you want to save $10,000 to go overseas. So let's assume now that we're going to earn 3.5% compounded monthly, and that you can save an extra $100 per week from a job or whatever. And we might also say that you've already got $1,000 to start your savings as a deposit. So how long will it take you to save the $10,000 balance? And I've put the answer there, but let's go to the screens first. So we would have filled in all our entries. We had 3.5%, so that goes in as a whole number. And that was being compounded monthly, which is 12 times per year. So we put all that information into here. I was going to add $100 in savings per week. So my payments are going to be $52 per year. And that will be $100 each time. And I started with $1,000. So that went in there. Now what you'll notice hopefully is that I have put the initial deposit in as a negative because we always start with a negative, whether it's our money or not. Here it was savings, and then I'm adding more savings. So my signs need to be the same because I'm doing the same thing. So I've also put my extra savings that I'm adding per week in as a negative value as well. Now, I wanted to know how long it's going to take me to hit 10,000. So I know that the balance I'm chasing at the end is the 10,000. Oopsies. So I have put my 10,000 as a positive number in the end. That's how much I want to have in the account. And then I would have just tapped on the end. And that would have told me that it's going to take me 86.8 weeks because my payments were in weeks. That number needs to be interpreted as a number of weeks. So basically it's going to take me 86.8 weeks, so roughly 87 weeks. At 86 weeks, you haven't quite hit it. So again, you know, if I rounded that up to 87 and then hit the future value, then I'm actually going to be a little bit over. So let's go through the remainder of that question there. Now, what else did I ask you? Firstly, I asked you how long would it take? And that was my 86.8 weeks, which we've got here. If you wanted to convert that to years, then obviously, what have we got? That was in, I don't know why I've written a divide by 12 under there. If that was 86 weeks, then I would have been dividing by 52 at the bottom of here to turn that into years. Now, how much interest did you earn? Well, and again, this doesn't appear on the screen. It kind of does. There is another button. If we went into this Calc 1 button, there's a little thing called amortization, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But generally, we need to show our working, so let's go through that. So the interest itself doesn't appear, only the interest rate, so you need to calculate it. It makes sense that the interest is the difference between how much money you've put into the account and how much you actually have at the end, and the difference will be the interest that you've earned. So in this case, we know that we're paying in $100 per week, and the calculator's told us that we're going to do this for 86.8 weeks. So $100 per week times the 86.8 weeks means that all up I've deposited $8,680. Plus I had put in the $1,000 of my own in the beginning. So I've contributed $9,680. But of course my balance at the end was $10,000. So the difference is the interest. So if I went my $10,000, take away the $9,680 that I put in there myself, the difference has come from interest. So the bank has paid me the $320 in interest. And that's really all you need to do there. Underneath it, what I've shown you is, again, for the year 12s, we generally tend to round up. We haven't hit it at 86, so we'd bump this in up to an 87. But you can see there I've actually, I've gone over my balance at that point. But if we wanted to calculate the interest there still, then basically we get the balance at the that we have at the end of that period, take away the $100 times the 87 payments that I've made, and also making sure we include that initial deposit. So basically that's being added in because I've got a double negative there. But you'd wind up with the interest of that $316.59. Ours is a bit more rudimentary at the top, but for the year 10 course, that's really all we need to do there. The year 12 course will get a little bit more stringent. That button I was talking about earlier will give you the same answer that the year 12s will get there. That's the button will say amortisation. And it has two boxes at the beginning, PM1 and PM2, which is payment 1 and payment 2. And what we're and then we hit on this sum. Remember this sum notation? That means sum. And so we want the sum of the interest. And this, we're basically asking for the interest between our first payment and our 87th payment. So by typing those two entries into the payment 1 and payment 2 boxes and then tapping on the sum of the interest box, it would give you the interest there. Okay, I think that's all we're going to do for now, and hopefully that's helpful. Okay, thank you.